Fallout Equestria the Chrysalis, Chapter 26, Part 6. That door, Dusty said, glancing back my way. How long do you think you knocked it out for? I shrugged, glaring out the window.
Dunno, they could have it working again in a few minutes if they're lucky and know what they're doing. Or maybe a few hours if we're lucky and they're incompetent.
Well, that's a lot better than nothing, Dusty said with a slow nod. Good thinking. I grunted again. It was less than 2 minutes later when the motor wagon skidded to a halt beside our partially concealed wagon. Dusty was already unstrapping by the time we stopped. Everyone out! Get everything transferred over to the motor wagon, quick! The vehicle lurched as Sickle leapt out of the back, landing with a great splash of mud, and I climbed out through the space she had vacated. I took a moment to strip away my generic changeling soldier disguise. We quickly got to work, hauling equipment and dumping it into the cargo area of the motor wagon. After just a couple of trips, Sickle got sidetracked, slowly walking around with a sway to her hips, a big grin plastered across her face. Dusty noticed. Sickle, what?
My ass feels amazing,
Sickle declared, which drew a snort from Starlight. Dusty merely paused, cocking his head with a questioning look. Are you high already?
Nah, this ain't drugs, I know drugs.
Sickle slowly strutted along, which I can assure you is some of the most bizarre imagery I've ever encountered.
This just feels good. Ever since that mine went off under me, walking felt like I was getting fucked in the ass with a barbed wire dildo.
Starlight winced.
Yeah, thanks for that charming imagery. Fuck.
You never said anything about that, Dusty said, and Sickle laughed.
Well, yeah, 'cause I ain't some whiny little cunt.
She paused, rolling a shoulder.
Oh, wow. One of the changelings tending to you said they put you in an autodock,
I said, while hauling several cases of ammunition between wagons.
Said it pulled about a half a pound of metal out of you.
Sickle said, twisting her head one way and the other, then stretching her back.
Fuck me, I think I forgot what it feels like to not have a bunch of bullets rattling around in me. Ain't half bad.
Good, Dusty said. Then move your ass and help get the stuff over— No, power armor last. We'll have to leave it behind if we don't have room.
Fine,
Sickle said, dumping the damaged power armor in the mud and grabbing a water barrel.
Way to spoil the mood.
Though it was a tight fit, we got everything in, including the pair of ruined power armors. The last half of loading was spent with Dusty scanning the horizon behind us, peering out through the light rain for any sign of pursuit.
Alright, that's all of it,
Sickle said, shoving the power armor into place and climbing across it to sit behind the gun again. We'd made sure to have any cases and other solid items at the front of the cargo hold, protecting any loose equipment from being trampled by Sickle and conveniently giving her a makeshift seat. Okay, mount up, Dusty said, hauling himself up to the passenger side window. The lack of functioning doors was a bit of a hindrance, but the armor plates welded across the side of the vehicle rendered them useless. Sickle snickered.
Mount this,
she said, slapping a spiked hoof against her armored flank. We all ignored the comment. I slid into the back seat, having gathered our collection of pit bucks. It was cramped, packed into the very middle of the vehicle, and the narrow windows beside me meant I had to either enter through the front seat and climb back, or enter through the cargo bed where Sickle stood. Fortunately, I had the small space to myself, which gave me enough room to lay out my equipment beside me. As I was getting settled, Dusty looked back, then up at the roof. Sickle, have you ever used a gun before?
Ain't like they're hard to use,
she replied.
And before you say shit, I ain't fitting in there, so don't even fucking ask.
You can have the gun if you're good with it, Dusty said firmly. Otherwise, I want Whisper up there.
Let her have it,
I said, floating up Starlight's pit buck.
I've got to get to working on these before we can use them.
Dusty frowned, contemplating it for a moment before sliding back into his seat. Fine for now. If she doesn't cut it though, you're swapping. Starlight, take us out. Continue on southeast for now. He had to point out the direction for her.
Sorry,
she said as the vehicle accelerated.
I can't really tell southeast from west without my pit buck.
She cast a quick glance over her shoulder before turning back to where she was going. The ride was already getting rough as we picked up speed.
It's not damaged, is it? It's fine, right? It's fine.
I said, as I pulled out my portable terminal and cables, connecting the two devices.
But Pip-Bucks have tags that let others locate them. I need to get these and change those tags so they can't follow us when we turn them on.
Not that I'd ever done so before, but Emerald had obviously managed, so it was possible. I simply had to work out how. The vehicle rattled and rocked as it crossed a patch of rocky ground, then accelerated down the slope of the hill, jostling us again before hitting the flat ground below. I remained focused on my work, sheltering behind the front seat from the spray of rain splashing from the motor wagon's hood. I only glanced up on occasion, when the vehicle shook particularly violently for some minor dip or bump in the terrain. Even on the relatively flat ground, I could hear the creaking and groaning of the ancient vehicle, nearly hidden behind the deep thrum of the spark-powered motor and the cacophonous hammering of rain on bare metal. Each time we hit a bump, I heard Dusty hiss softly under his breath. After a couple of minutes, he finally called out, "Sickle, keep a close watch out behind us. You're our eyes right now." He settled back into his seat, fiddling around with something. It wasn't until I heard him quietly hissing through his teeth again, despite the smooth ride, that my curiosity was piqued, and I poked my head up to see around the seat. He had opened up his barding, and was in the process of slowly peeling it back from his chest. The flesh beneath it was pink and raw, with most of the coat singed away, and the fabric of his barding clung to the wound.
Holy shit!
Starlight said, casting worried glances his way between looks back to where she was driving.
Do you need a healing potion?
No, Dusty said, through gritted teeth. He let out a groan of relief as he pulled the last of the barding away. The wound was oozing. He retrieved a bottle of water and splashed it over his hooves. "We're low on potions. Save them for critical injuries. This is just a second-degree burn. It'll be fine unless he gets infected. Whisper, do you still have that soap?" I had kept one of the containers in my bags, as silly as it might seem, but one of those simple things I still held onto. I dug it out and passed it over. He quickly washed his hooves, then proceeded to carefully explore around the wound before gently cleaning the raw flesh. He managed to remain silent, though I could see the strain in his neck and jaw. I sat back, returning to my work.
So I'm guessing I earned and I told you so?
Dusty merely grunted at first. It was several more seconds before he replied. "You made your case, I made the call." He returns to tending to himself. It seemed that was all he had to say on the subject. The ensuing silence lasted until Starlight finally spoke up again.
So, speaking of, now that we're out of there and we don't seem to have a whole army of shape-shifting bugs chasing us down, think you can fill us in on what the hell just happened?
So, as we rolled across the rain-soaked wasteland, I filled them in on everything they'd missed.
Wait, Chrysalis?
Starlight said, the vehicle swerving a little as she looked back before straightening out again.
She was that evil old world queen you were talking about, right? This queen named herself after her? It sounded like all of their queens had done so.
I said over the Pip-Buck screen. It was currently scrolling through data in a sort of debug mode while I double-checked my work.
That's like super bad, isn't it?
I gave a quiet huff.
Well, a changeling hive numbering in the thousands, with vast resources, advanced arms and armor, and then soldiers extensively trained in arcanotech-simulated environments, a stockpile of imprisoned ponies to feed their entire population, agents who have been secretly employing mercenaries and raiders, and a lot of equipment being moved in and out of their heavily fortified base, all of that led by a queen that was practically salivating over the opportunity to step forward and end the reign of ponies, and who named herself after the most infamous pony-loathing changeling in all history.
I snorted, pulling the cables from Starlight's Pip-Buck and holding it out.
So yeah, it's pretty bad.
Starlight gently took her Pip-Buck.
Wonderful.
Lacking the time to mount it on her leg, she set it beside the steering wheel, switching it over to display the map. I'd hooked up the next Pip-Buck, ready to run the same process that I had just perfected on that first one, when I paused.
Actually, it's even worse than that. Mind you, I never met the first Chrysalis, but the impression I always got from others was that she was a selfish and sadistic megalomaniac. This Chrysalis didn't seem that way. She spent time explaining and justifying her position. I don't even think she was driven by some simple lust for power or hatred for ponies. She presented good reasons to support whatever it is she's going to do. Good reasons?
Starlight said.
You don't really think— Hold up,
I said, raising a hoof, even though in hindsight Starlight wouldn't see the gesture.
Don't think for a second that her having good reasons means I agree with what she's doing. I think her treatment of ponies is aberrant, for one, and I don't see that changing. But I'm still an infiltrator, and that means I need to understand individuals I might find repugnant. I don't have that luxury of simply dismissing their motivations as inherently flawed and unreasonable. This Chrysalis has some very good reasons supporting whatever it is she plans on doing, and that makes her hive considerably more dangerous.
Dusty grunted, as he finished strapping his barding back on, covering up the thick bandage he had loosely packed over his wound. What kind of reasons?
Well, she blames ponies for everything that's wrong in the world.
I said.
Ponies made the megaspells that turned Equestria into a balefire-blasted wasteland. Xenophobia still holds strong, even towards the zebras that are so much more similar to ponies than changelings are. Then you've got the pervasive violence and cruelty bred by the wasteland. Warlords, slavers, and raiders, she said. Ponies that prey on other ponies because the wasteland isn't cruel enough on its own. They're fairly sound and convincing arguments, especially to a non-pony.
Starlight snorted.
Yeah, okay, I hate raiders as much as any pony, but they ain't exactly normal. Shit, and what the hell is she complaining about slavery? She's got a bunch of ponies captive as food. I imagine it's easy to see a difference between slavery for economic gain and slavery for basic survival needs, especially when the slaves in question belong to a group you already have cause to dislike. They could even make the argument that the ponies they've captured are probably a good deal healthier and happier than slaves out in the wasteland. That's still fucked up.
Starlight grumbled.
I don't agree with her conclusions either.
I said.
But I recognize how the reasons behind it could be very convincing to others.
You said this makes her more dangerous, Dusty said. How so?
Oh, not her.
I corrected.
Her hive. If she took the time to explain all of this to me, a newcomer to her hive that wasn't even fully trusted, then it's likely that many others in the hive have heard all those reasons. I don't think the hive is following a tyrant because she demands their unwavering loyalty. I think they're following an idea. And an idea is much harder to kill.
Dusty mulled that over for several seconds before slumping back in his seat. Shit.
So what do we do?
Starlight said. She was answered with only the roar of wind whipping through the windows. After a minute, Dusty finally spoke again. We need to get away from here. They know who we are, and even with pip-bucks, I doubt we'll be able to see them coming. As much as I hate to say it, I don't think we'll be safe anywhere around here. Maybe Trotston is far enough away to be out of their reach. He looked up at the metal roof above him. But I kinda doubt it. Maybe northern Equestria? Starlight shot him a look.
Wait, you mean run away?
He glumly nodded. This is way too big for us to fight.
Well, on our own, maybe.
Starlight said. And who else would we call on? Dusty said, his voice rising. Merford has the most capable military force in the region, and they'd still be lucky to get past that entryway. Not to mention they've got bounties on our heads. Who else? Gemstone? Rust? We're taking a hoofful of semi-skilled fighters against an ordinary military force? They'd be slaughtered, assuming they haven't already infiltrated them. Hell, that's assuming it's even a stand-up fight. We don't even know who's already on their side. Starlight frowned, but said nothing. Look, I don't want to leave either. Merford is my home, but we're running out of places we can go.
We can still go to Baltimore,
I said, looking up from the pip book. The second retagging was proceeding much more easily than the first, now that I knew what to do.
But that'll take some time. Maybe after that we'll come up with a better plan.
Dusty grunted. That gets us out of the area for a while at least. And yeah, still need to check up on that. Afraid this might complicate the search for your own hive mates. His expression shifted, hesitating before reluctantly adding, assuming these changelings aren't their descendants.
Unlikely,
I said, as debug information flashed across the screen of the current pip-buck. The tag alteration was successful once again.
Not impossible, but there are many unlikely factors. This looks more like some other hive survival plan.
Still, this complicates things, especially if all of your leads are in this region. If they've been scouring the wasteland, they might have found any other CLT facilities. I grimaced.
I know, but that doesn't really change anything. I was already aware that I might be the last survivor of my hive. There was a chance I'd never find anything anyway.
I pulled the cables, holding out the cleaned pip book to Dusty.
But we know that there was one cocoon site they haven't found. There still might be more.
He looked at the pip book, sighed, and took it. Baltimore. He undid the flap in his barding, covering his left leg, slipping the pip book in and securing it to his leg. He blinked a few times as the EFS sparkled in his eyes, then settled into his chair again, slowly browsing through the device's menus. We never did deal with Big Gun.
We still can.
I said, as I prepped the next pip book.
Just get me near Merford, and I can take care of the rest.
Dusty mulled that over for a long, silent moment. How long would it take you?
Depends on the situation I find.
I said, eyes dancing across the screen.
Assuming he isn't out of town, travel time plus 6 hours should give me enough time and flexibility for almost any situation. Plus 12 would be almost decadent. Either way is the maximum, depending on the situation, and might be considerably quicker.
He nodded slowly. And you're sure you want to do it this way? I paused, looking up from my screen.
I would prefer a non-violent situation, but given all the factors involved, I believe killing Big Gun is the best option we have.
Even over doing nothing?
Especially over doing nothing.
Dusty looked at me intently. Eventually, he nodded once more. Okay. We'll get you to Merford. I nodded as well, returning to my work, and started to plan. God, it felt so nice to do this much longer than usual. It's just this story really freaking captivates me. Anywho, let's get on to our armor-plated donators. Top donators: Jessie Smith, Zar630, BadassWaffle, Onlyonething, Ceru, Orion, and Caladis. Magic, Jock, Luciisu, Darkside, Rayden, Runescythe, Will, Twinkie, Luigi, Chancellor, Crust, Big Smoke, Murder Princess, Little Mighty, Solar Symphony, and many more awesome people. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.